Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, this is Keith Moore of Autoscheduler.ai, and you're listening to the New Warehouse Podcast. Here's today's safety tip. To avoid congestion near the docks, try to schedule trailers nearest the staging area or warehouse locations that inventory will be coming from. This also helps to minimize travel distance and will maximize your ability to interleave tasks.
Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I will be joined by Keith Moore. He is the Chief Product Officer at Autoscheduler.ai. And Autoscheduler helps you to schedule better and make sure that you're optimizing your warehouse more efficiently. And it's actually what they're calling an accelerant to your WMS. So we're going to dig a little more into that, find out what that's all about. And Keith is going to give us kind of the story behind Autoscheduler and how it kind of came out into the light and is now winning a lot of awards this year, actually. So, Keith, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing great, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely happy to have you on. Happy to learn more about Autoscheduler. So why don't you tell us, I guess, let's start, give a brief overview of what it is that Autoscheduler actually does.
Yeah, so if you're looking for like the one bullet point, we're a software as a service solution that optimizes all these fragmented warehouse operations.
Okay.
But if you think of that kind of from a more holistic perspective and you look at different distribution centers and really warehouses, logistics operations, because you can even throw production in there in some scenarios, what you end up with is this smorgasbord of different processes that are generally maintained by different software. So you have a warehouse management system focused on distribution center, the distribution center, what inventory is where, what locations exist, what's usable, and how do you actually build out a work queue. You might then have a different software focused on your yard. What trailers are on your yard? Where are they? What inventory is on them? You have a different software that tells you, when those trailers are going to arrive to your yard. You might even have a different software for the check-in, check-out process. Right. And then at some of your more complex sites, you have a production facility in a completely separate software that's running production, right? And so in the logistics world, just to throw some names out there, your Blue Yonders, SAPs, Pinks, your 4Kites / Project 44s of the world. You have all these softwares at play, and generally you'll have a few people responsible for making decisions on how to use all this information to get all of the inventory either into that building and then most importantly out of that building and out of that campus to your customers when it needs to get there. Right. And so what we really do is a bunch of mathematics, and we're a warehouse resource optimization solution that takes in all of the inputs. So basically, what do you have? When are trailers available? What inventory do you have? What locations exist? How many people do you have? Or how many robotic systems do you have that can all perform different tasks?
Right.
and we match that up to the demand on the building. When do things need to ship? What inventory needs to be where? How can you do that in the most efficient way possible? And so, the simple black box ins and outs are we take all of this data, put it through a bunch of advanced optimization, and our output is going to be a plan for here's exactly when each person or each actor should perform all of these tasks to get the right inventory out the right door at the right time.
So it's kind of connecting all these different parts and really making sure that they're flowing the way they should be. So it's very interesting. I can dig a little deeper into that a little later. But I did see somewhere, I think on their website, about you're making kind of warehouses sexy, and I think we're on the same page there. Actually, when I started the podcast, I put out this article on LinkedIn, and I think I called it "Making Warehouses Sexy" with a question mark. So I'm curious, from your side and from the auto scheduler front, how do you define sexiness in the warehousing space?
Oh man, yeah, huge endeavor of ours, and because they are sexy, right? There are so many people, so many processes that you really have to understand in order to make the whole building and the whole operation run efficiently. And very frequently now, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, you hear all about supply chain tech.
Oh yeah. And
if you ask anybody about supply chain tech, it's even pretty rare that somebody mentions a warehousing organization. And if they do, it's probably a robotics company.
Yeah.
And so, when we talk about making the warehouse sexy, you have to understand that it is one of the most critical junctures in all of the operations. People talk about, well, transportation didn't show up because, trucking is so hard to find right now and labor is hard to find in transportation. And anytime you think about the problems that kind of propagate through the supply chain, which there are many, and we probably don't have the time to go into right now, there is a high probability that one of the problems that resulted in somebody not showing up or inventory not needing to be where it is a backup at a distribution center or a warehouse. These operations become absolute bottlenecks in the supply chain because you only have a finite amount of capacity and a huge amount of demand right now. And so kind of bringing that to light and helping people understand what they can be doing to make all distribution centers and warehouses more efficient, whether that be, modification of layout, whether that be introducing new hardware like robotic systems, or introducing cool technologies like digital twins, artificial intelligence to actually make how those operations behave a little bit more intelligent. Right. And so there's a lot of room for innovation in distribution centers and warehousing. And so I, just like yourself, that's what I really want to share with the world. My focus obviously being on the mathematics side of things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, to your point, there's so much happening in the warehousing space, and I think even like you mentioned, the supply chain being in the news and stuff like that, and they're not talking about the warehouses much. It sounds like, it's more about the containers and this and that, and the boats are stuck at the port and all that stuff. But there's so much going on within, these four walls that like our domain is in, and it's pretty incredible. I think there's such a perception, or at least, there was such a perception by the masses that, it's just like four concrete walls and, box goes in, box comes out. And, to simplify it, that is what happens, but there's so much more that goes into that box, making it out the other side, to end up on, someone's doorstep or at another facility to make sure that it gets to someone on time. It's really incredible. And, we talk about, the sexiness kind of being like, I guess, the flow of things that happen, because, you certainly could have bad flow and, have an unsexy warehouse, I'm sure, but, it sounds like you guys are kind of helping with that flow and really, kind of making things sexier and making things work together and really, really go through that flow the way it's supposed to go. So I kind of want to take it back a little bit on the kind of origin sides of Autoscheduler, because, the technology itself was initially, it was developed for Procter and Gamble. Is that right?
Yeah, spot on. So over a decade ago, actually, they approached our parent company and said, hey, we're having a problem at some of our distribution centers.
Right.
We find, most of the operations they're running are going to be 24-hour operations. Mm-hmm. And they found that in between, so at shift change, the continuity of their plan wasn't really maintained. So shift lead number one said that they wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and shift lead number two comes in and is like, no, we want to do Y, X, Z. And so the ordering of operations became a challenge. There was a lot of inefficiency inside of those buildings, particularly around that time, but also not just at shift change, but also just maintaining operations. If you have more visibility into a longer horizon from execution. So when we're talking execution visibility, you're generally talking about 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
You want to know what's coming down the pipeline, not just for this shift, but for the next day or two, so that you can plan effectively for it. And so they actually approached us and said, hey, could you help us build a solution that can optimize these operations and build a plan for us and tell us, every hour on the hour, what do we need to be doing for the next 48? And then when things change, you build a new plan, and, things are constantly going to change. You're never going to execute to perfection, but you can dynamically update and continue to provide the best course forward given all of the demand. And so we started inside of Procter & Gamble and really built that with them. We retained all the intellectual property. It's our software.
Okay.
And then we scaled up inside of that organization to a large number of sites. And then we actually got released from our non-disclosure agreement with them. So we were able to start talking about this solution we had built with the rest of the market. And so we just did that this past year, 2020. So we're a little over a year old at this point.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting because, I was wondering, how it came from this exclusive thing to now it's on the market. It's available to everybody. So I mean, with that being said, I mean, about a year old, you said, and, like I mentioned a little earlier, I mean, you guys are now in 2021. I see, the press releases from you guys. You guys are winning a lot of awards from different magazines this year. So I mean, how has the reception been in the last year or so as you guys have really been, I guess, out there in a sense, right?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
It's been stellar. The world has really desired something like what we do. The challenge is what we do hasn't really ever been defined there's no Gartner term for what Autoscheduler is, or at least there wasn't. Now it's warehouse resource optimization when we came to market. And so the world has been fantastic. You look at the customers that we're working with now, and unfortunately I can't name a lot of them, but if it's a top 10 consumer goods company, you look at the Fortune 500, chances are we're working with them.
Nice.
And as far as the demand and the need, yes, we win awards, and we're super grateful about that we're nominated and we win those awards. But it's really, people have felt a need for a while to get more out of their distribution center software than they have. And that's not really a knock on warehouse management systems, because warehouse management systems are really good at some things. They're really good at being the source of truth for a work queue. They're really good at telling you what inventories in what location and when, what inventory should be allocated to what order at what, maybe not the time, but they can at least propose that. What they're not good at, companies have had to go and build their own little homegrown solutions. And so if you go and talk to just about anybody who's running a warehouse management system, we say, great, how off the shelf is it? And they're like, yeah, we bought it, and then we made all these customizations and configurations, and we have Python scripts doing this and R scripts doing that. And, our IT group maintains this piece, and we're not quite sure how it works, but it gives us this schedule at this time. And so what we do is we basically try to say, how can we take all of these little sub processes and sub routines that companies have had to go build themselves? They're not really maintained, because most companies running a massive supply chain are not software companies. And we can say, we will do all of that for you, give you an optimal plan across every single process that's going to be touched in your distribution center, and constantly dynamically keep it updated for you, so you don't really have to worry about it. And that's really appealing to these companies, because it takes a huge load off of their IT team, off of their operational team. and it makes everybody a little bit better at their job.
It's good to hear. I mean, the reception has been great. And like I mentioned, the awards and stuff that you guys are getting, obviously very warranted. And, it's interesting to see how, and, I've certainly seen as well. I mean, I worked for two different companies that had the same system. And the first one I worked for, the system was like super customized. Like they did so many things to make it work to the way that they wanted to work. And, it worked very well. What they did was very smart. But then the second one I got to was the same system, and I was like expecting these certain things, and they weren't there because they were all custom things. So it's very interesting how companies will go through that and try and do that. So, being able to bring something in like Autoscheduler and have it kind of tackle those things and really be able to solidify everything and do what you want it to do is really a great thing. So you mentioned in there, and, obviously in the software world and system world of warehousing, we have so many different acronyms, right? We got like WMS, WCS, WES, YMS, TMS, on and on and on, right? So you mentioned in there, I think you said it's a warehouse resource optimization system, right? Get that right?
That is the current Gartner term used to describe what we do. Mm-hmm. But, I don't really intend to be any of those systems, right? Warehouse management systems have their place. Yard management systems have their place. Control and execution systems have their place. Our job as a software is to pull all of these systems together in the one plan to rule them all. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to pretend. So you have all these companies that build like automated storage and retrieval systems. Yeah. I'm never going to pretend that Autoscheduler is going to be able to control the finite movements of that system better than the group that, built the hardware and wrote the software. Yeah. But what I can know is I can know how long does it take to do things, and if you think about an ASRS in particular, when you're retrieving inventory from it, that inventory gets pulled out, gets put on a spur somewhere, and somebody then has to probably pick that up, bring it to a staging area. That staging area is then picked up by a forklift and driven straight into a truck. And so it's more than one process that's required in order to make an operation run efficiently. And so how do we take all of these different, WMS, WCS, WES, all of the and people and all of the actors that you have and bring it together in one comprehensive plan that enables you to do everything you need to do while we're understanding and respecting kind of the lines and the boundaries of what had traditionally been siloed in the operation. Like receiving and shipping should not be two separate processes. Yeah. However, they are today in most sites. And so, we'll eventually come up with a term that is much better. Right now, I just call us an accelerator, right? We are an accelerator for the business because we want to pull everything in and work with everybody. We're not rip and replace for anything.
Got it. Okay. And so accelerator, I was actually going to ask you about that. And, I like that term. I mean, I think it sounds like what you guys are doing is really kind of, it's almost like, it sounds like to me, almost like the glue, like for all these systems, right? It's kind of putting everything together and like you said, it's accelerating the flow and making sure things go through. So I mean, with that being said, dealing with a lot of systems, we kind of talked about some, all these different ways that companies come up to work with them and all these things. So it can be complicated. So I mean, how difficult is it, and what does implementation look like for Autoscheduler? Like when you try and drop Autoscheduler on top of all these systems.
Yeah, software is easy. People are challenging once you get them involved. It's it's actually, we've got it down to where we have a pretty good process for deploying at our customers. There's particularly because we've kind of gone through consumer goods as our beachhead market. Most people are using a fairly standard, or at least using one of a few warehouse management systems. And, most often we'll say, let's integrate with your WMS and let's start there. And after that, we'll look at using, pulling in data from your YMS or, pushing plans to your YMS if you're using one. And we'll integrate with Kites in Project 44 as a phase 2 type process. But at most sites, just to give you kind of a flavor of the type of timeline we're talking, this is not a WMS integration timeline. This is we went to a customer and we started to have the technical conversations in August, and we were deployed by November at the first site. And then for the second site, we didn't have the technical conversations and we deployed it in 2 weeks, right? It's, start to finish, generally a pretty fast process.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that, I have a really talented team. My engineering staff is absolutely fantastic, but we also have a really stellar network of partners. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention them, because they have a lot of expertise in all the different warehouse management systems and different softwares that we integrate with. And so very often we actually bring them in to work with us to make sure it goes quickly, because as a part of making the warehouse sexy again, particularly when you're dealing with software, you can't take forever.
Oh, no.
When I came into supply chain and learned how long it took to actually do installations, it just blew my mind.
Oh yeah. Same.
Speed is of the essence.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, when I got my first job in, kind of logistics warehousing and coming out of school, and we did a WMS upgrade, I could not believe how long it took. I was like, by the time you upgrade, it's it's already out of date. Yeah.
Well, I remember 3 years ago, Manhattan had the ad, "Never upgrade your WMS again."
Yeah.
And I read that and I'm like, well, that's just like the cloud, right? Everybody knows this. That's like, when's the last time you upgraded Facebook? When's the last time you upgraded Twitter or Instagram or any of the software you use day to day?
Yeah.
It's like, this is a thing. You shouldn't have to use that as your primary advertisement. This is just how the world is run now. You should catch up.
Oh yeah.
And so we definitely live by that mantra on, try to make people's lives easier by using technology as it is meant to be used.
Yeah, definitely. And it's an interesting point there, talk about the different apps and social media that we use in our personal life and how it just kind of updates on its own, right? And, it's interesting how, far behind we were in terms of utilizing that technology, but now you see all these kind of technologies that we use in our daily lives and personal lives as consumers now kind of translating over into our space. So it's really an interesting thing. So, and as things certainly have been changing in our space as well, with the pandemic and technology changing and, kind of forcing us to almost speed up our tech to keep up with the increased demand due to everything. I mean, how do you think Autoscheduler kind of fits into that puzzle and really helps companies grow into the future of our industry?
Man, great question. And it's one, we actually have a kind of a 3-tiered response to help companies get there, because, where are we going and what are we doing with Autoscheduler? Our goal is to build the best plan ever that everybody can execute.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and our partners at Longbow Advantage talk about this all the time, warehouses produce a lot of data. So the plan we create, if we're telling you what unit load is going where for the next 48 hours, that's a lot of data. And it becomes really challenging for people to actually ingest all of that information and make the right decisions. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, at most distribution centers, it is people who are releasing work and performing allocations and prioritizing the work queue. And some of your more advanced ones are going to have some robotic systems that intertwine with some of the human capital that they're using. But where we're going is dark planning. It's, everybody talks about lights out warehousing or dark warehousing. The first step in that is dark planning, which is you should have people responsible for doing exception handling on things that software can't handle, but you should have software making the decision of what inventory is going where, when do you release that work, which actor are you releasing it to? And I use the term actor because it could be a person, it could be a robotic system. And so that's kind of the first step. And so how do you walk people there? There's always the crawl, walk, run mentality. And I know that's a trope that's fairly overused, but what we find at some of our sites is, we'll go and implement and we'll run side by side. They'll have, most of the planners will have their warehouse management system up on one screen and Autoscheduler up on the other. And they'll look and says, what does Autoscheduler say to do? And they'll go and actually make those changes in the WMS. And we sat with one of our customers recently to do that. We said, great, for cross-docking was the example being used. And they said, we want to cross-dock this inventory. I said, great. Well, here's the unit load. Here's the receipt. Here's when you need to bring it in. here's the outbound shipment you're going to put it on. Here's the staging area you put it. Here's the order it's actually going on. Literally everything you need. I'm giving it to you. It's right here. And then we said, can you walk us through how you do that in your WMS? And then 4 minutes later, after a bunch of searching, they're like, all right, great, it's done. I'm like, well, this is kind of wasteful, right?
Yeah.
Even though we're giving you everything, it's still taking you 4 minutes to execute one, and there might be 200 that you need to execute on a given day. And this is just cross-docking. There's all sorts of other work.
Oh, yeah.
And so how do you take that burden of, even if you have the perfect plan, how do you make it easy to implement? And so what we did is we've actually introduced, so the crawl is side by side. The walk then is, we've introduced a semi-automated process where we actually say, if you want to do this, check this box. And they'll just check all the boxes. Yeah. And then we basically built a suite of APIs that go and inject all of this back into the warehouse management system. So it automatically updates everything that they had done manually historically. So it's almost like a combination of, digital twin AI and just some good old fashioned RPA, robotic process automation. And so we kind of introduced a semi-supervised process where people are still making the decisions, but we're making it really easy for them to do it quickly. Yeah. So, we're giving you 48 hours worth of plans. You can go ahead and say, great, do this for the next 24 hours and I can revisit it again tomorrow. And your job's effectively done, down to, we'll tell you what cuts you're making, or we're telling you when to pick, when to load, when to do everything. And then eventually to go dark, it's actually a really easy process change for our customers, because you go from the semi-automated process where they're selecting actions to take. Yeah. And then you just have everything pre-selected and they just get to deselect what they don't want. And so it's just as simple as, after a while of that, you've hit this point of runtime, you flip a switch. Yeah. And everything's automated. And, we have quite a few sites now, and I can't name the customer, who are fully automating a lot of the processes Autoscheduler recommends in their distribution centers.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, I think, you said something interesting in there about how Autoscheduler is kind of telling you basically everything that needs to happen, and including, like, where does the inventory need to go, and then, the right staging place. We're talking about cross-docking. And you mentioned, how it would take 4 minutes for someone to do that manually, and you have so many to do in a day. I think, in those times, especially like when you get, more work, or you have like a heavier work load that day or something, I think, those things like putting the inventory in the right place and, the best place, and those things get overlooked because it's like, I got an empty spot here, so like I'll put it here. And then, things are not as efficient, even though like you think you're moving faster. Maybe you're moving faster, but then, by putting it in the wrong spot, then you're not being as efficient. You're kind of losing that time on the back end. So it's pretty interesting point there that, how Autoscheduler kind of, and it's a good example of how it can help you save time and really, obviously time is money over time as well. So, definitely interesting thing, and it'd be interesting to see, how you guys continue to grow and help companies grow as you expand more and grow even more, and you're out in the open phase now. Hello, I'm here. Autoscheduler is here. So it's great to talk to you, Keith, and I can't wait to hear more in the next year about going to continue to expand and help companies really help get sexier in the warehouse environment. So how can people find out more information about Autoscheduler if they're interested?
Yes. Step one, go to our website. It's Autoscheduler.ai. The other thing is I will happily connect with anybody on LinkedIn. As you can tell, I'm fairly passionate about the subject. So, I'd love to chat with anybody. If there are ideas out there that can help us grow as a company or help our customers, I'm all for it. So I would say both our website and LinkedIn would be the best two ways to connect.
Okay, great. We'll put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well. So Keith, thank you again for coming on the show today and talking to us all about Autoscheduler.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.